So it wasn't quite the dream start we all hoped for, but what would being a Reading fan be without a little bit of blues to get you in the early part of the season? Yes, we lost to the fake hoops, but we bounced back with a win over Gillingham and a very youthful side indeed. We will discuss our so-so start right here on the Tilehurst podcast, episode number 133. Hello, my name is Dan Wimbush, editor of the Tilehurst.com. I'm delighted to be joined this week by a returning assistant editor, Marc May. Marc, hello.
How's it going?
Not so bad, thank you. And man making his second appearance, you all seem to appear around Fulham games. It is Ben Greenwood. Ben, hello.
Hello, thanks for having me again.
It is a delight to welcome you back on the show. For those of you who missed our pre-Wembley special, Ben is the man behind the Yapstam Batman video and lots of other funky animations and great bits and pieces you see connected to the club. So great to have you back on the show. Gents, before we launch into the whole recap, how are you feeling a week into the season? Are you ready for summer again? Or are you relishing it now it's got underway?
I don't think I'm ready for the summer weather to come back, that's for sure. We've certainly been missing that. We're back into winter as far as I can tell in that regard. But the season itself, I mean, it hasn't really started in my view yet because I haven't been to a game, so it's been a bit of a weird one.
Yeah, I was just saying I was really optimistic before QPR. I always get really excited just as it's about to start, and then my hopes kind of fell away straight away. But I'm excited for the season. It'd be nice to have a big home game with a proper crowd, and I think Fulham will really get it going.
Absolutely. That's when it all starts to feel real. Well, we'll get to that defeated QPR, the win over Gillingham, and lots more. We've got a new contract for Liam Moore to talk about, a new signing, some transfer rumours, a new role for Sir John Medeski, and a bit of a row over car parking charges, plus an absolutely bulging mail sack, as Westy would say, because we've been beat, and that is what always happens when we get beat. But look, we love it. It doesn't matter whether we've won or lost. This is your show, so as always, continue to get that feedback in. We'll get to that later. In the meantime, let's delve into that recap.
View from the Tilehurst end, recapping this week's championship action.
So it was an opening day trip to Loftus Road for Reading, a battle between the hoops and the fake hoops, and unfortunately the fake hoops won. It was a 2-0 win for QPR. Comfortable in the end, Marc, and not the start we dreamed of, as I said right at the top of the show.
Yeah, and it could have been more. I think on the match report, Will did it for us and basically said, and you can see on the highlights, that Washington in particular could have had a hat-trick. Manoni made a couple of decent saves and QPR missed a couple of decent chances, certainly. And if you count the chances that Reading missed, I think there was only really one that I would say was a potential goal, or certainly a good chance for it. And that's probably the most disappointing thing. Positives, get the QPR game, like away game, out of the way early. It's always good to get that out because we never win there. So it's nice to go back to the 45 game season and have the one game that we don't want to do anyway out of the way.
Absolutely. Getting that bogey game out of the way. Was it 1 win and 11 now, I think it is, over QPR? So
yeah, and it's never entertaining either, which is always good to get out of the way.
You know, and it wasn't telly at this time either, so at least people in the wider country didn't get to see us play absolutely horrendously. Exactly. Ben, are you treating this as a one-off aberration, or does it give you slight concern going forward?
It gives me a little bit of concern that, you know, if they'd have had better finishing, it could have been another one of those games that we had last season, like the Norwich and the Fulham game, and it makes me think that's not quite out of the system yet. But then again, I know we'll talk about it, but the amount of injuries, and it was a bit of an odd team, wasn't it? So it doesn't concern me too much. I'm sure they'll pick up from here.
Yeah, on the team selection front, I mean, the big red flag was the fact that Reading could only name 6 substitutes. 3 of those are players with not a single game of Football League experience behind them as well, and one of those was a sub-goalkeeper. So I think the only 2 recognised subs you had was new signing Modou Barrow and Joseph Mendes, who himself hasn't exactly set English fire alight, despite his nice end to the season. So the starting lineup contained 3 debutants. You had Vito Manone in goal, you had Big John Daddy Bodvarsson, and up front you had Pele Clement on the wing as well. Quite a few holdovers from Wembley as well. You had the likes of Thiago Ilori playing, you had Tyler Blackett, you had Chris Gunter, you had Swift and Kelly in the middle with George Evans. So you did have a fair bit of experience in there, Marc. But in hindsight, if you actually looked at that team, was it any better than what QPR put out?
No, not necessarily. In QPR, like, a lot of fans have mocked them for the fact they haven't really made any signings, but what that gives you is continuity. And that team that played against us for QPR played with each other last year. They probably didn't do very well, but they know each other. And our team didn't know each other. Even the players that were there last season, players like Popper and Ilori, didn't really play very much. So it was a newish sort of team. I wasn't expecting Pele Clement to be a starter in this team, and yet he has to be because there's no one else really.
Yeah, a very strange looking lineup. Tactically, we know what Stam likes. We know the style of football he likes to play. But given the personnel at his disposal, was he right to persevere with that, Ben, or should he maybe have been a little bit more pragmatic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. Obviously, he's got his way, and I can understand wanting to mould the team and get them to play that way. But it did seem like at times people weren't quite sure where they should be, and especially this wing-back system. I'm not quite sure. I think Popper was playing right wing-back for a time there, and I wouldn't quite trust him to do that job yet. He's not been there long enough to, have learnt that all the way they will have to play it. So
yeah, and he was actually one of the few to come out of pre-season with some real credit. He scored some good goals. We talked about it in the pre-season show. He's involved in more goals than anybody else. But I suppose we're looking at the positives. I mean, John Daddy Bobasson had a good game up front, very hard work, and we got exactly what we expected out of him, which was, he ran his socks off, battled hard with not a lot of service, and unfortunately he picks up that injury around the hour mark. No real news yet as to how long he's going to be out. He was not involved in the Carabao Cup first round game against Gillingham, which we'll come on to a little bit later. But Mark, a bit of a blow, especially after such a promising start.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got to take the rough with the smooth, and the fact that it was a positive start as opposed to being a complete flop is already something. And I think Barrow and Manoni as well, I'd say, have both made decent-ish starts. So I'm quite happy with the way they've started. But injury for Bodvarsson, it just kind of sums it up at the moment. The whole 6 subs thing, I'm sure we could have thrown Sandro Weiser on there or another under 18.
Who's this man you talk about?
But
I've heard of him. He's a rumour.
But the Apstam chose not to. Obviously, he must know where he is. We have no idea. But we kind of take it as, Yapstam's sending a message to the board, but I'm not necessarily sure it's the board that need the message sent to at the moment. It's more the fact that the players that we're targeting aren't obviously the right players to target, and therefore we're left with these 6 subs, 3 players who've never played. Maybe he just really fancies a Tilehurst Rookie of the Year award being properly contested this year.
That's a very, very, worthy honour and highly coveted at that, considering what generally tends to happen the following seasons. Anyway, Ben, Vito Manone, we mentioned pulls off a couple of smart saves, but I suppose I'm straying slightly into Gillingham territory, but I watched Anzi Yakola last night, and I'm sat there thinking, what's he really done wrong to not be given that chance of staking a claim in the first team? Because Manone's distribution was a little bit off. Yeah, his shot stopping was good, but Yakola's been playing in this system now, under Stam, for a year. Do you think he can maybe feel a little bit hard done by?
A little, yes, I guess, but we don't see him, week in, week out in training. We haven't seen enough of him ourselves to make that call, I don't think. The thing Manone has on his side is experience, isn't it? He's played at the highest level and he's played a lot of games, whereas Yakola, I didn't know him before he came here, and I don't think many people did, so... but
he's really big in Finland.
Yeah, definitely. But he did look good last night. He's very calm on the ball, and he made a crucial save in that game, which, could have changed it a lot. So I think he's a little bit unlucky to not get a chance in the league, I suppose. But if he keeps playing well in the cup, then you never know. Things change.
And it's important for Manoni as well to have a goalkeeper that's pushing him.
Yes,
we never really thought last year that maybe Yakola was pushing Al Habsi to play so well. We never really considered that because we have obviously no evidence that it happened. But Al Habsi did play well. Maybe Manoni will do the same thing.
Yeah, I just thought it was slightly interesting that Stam didn't go with it, just stay with Manone in that scenario, just to give him a bit more experience, give him a bit more sort of familiarity with the system, although I suppose it was a very changed side anyway, so kind of negates that. But the other debutant was Pella Clement. Not so great at QPR. Will gives him a 5 out of 10 from what I've seen and read. I don't think he deserved any more than that either. Very sort of on the fringe. You could tell it was a rough sort of introduction, especially against a Ian Holloway side that was pressing us. Don't think he would have come up against that too much playing for young Ajax. So a tough baptism of fire. But Ben, I thought he bounced back really well against Gillingham, especially in that second half. Had a hand in one of the goals, and there does look like there's something there with him. Yeah,
he has moments, doesn't he? He sort of reminds me of Piazon. He's that kind of player,
yes.
I think.
Even physically, he looks a little bit similar.
He does, and he's obviously got moments of class and some trickery on the ball. It's whether he's tough enough and can roll his sleeves up and do the dirty work is where I would question. But second half against Gillingham, he got involved, and when Barrow came on, actually, I think they looked a bit better combining. There's promise there, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mark, going back to the QPR game, the same sort of error seems to crop up. Poor marking, switching off for the first goal, and the second is just a clumsy moment from Thiago Ilori that earns him a red card. Thankfully, he's already got that suspension out of the way, but it does worry you, these lapses.
Well, both times they've not stopped the crossing ball coming in, and I think it was Clement who lost the man in the first goal. I'm not too sure about the second goal that came down the our left flank. I mean, I kind of agree with what Ben says when he said if QPR were a better team, that could have been 5-0. Which, if we go to a Fulham or a Villa or Norwich, whatever, they might be able to punish us a little bit more. And I'm willing to allow it at the moment because it's the first game of the season. You'd think back to last year, we went to Wolves and lost 2-0 in a very similar game.
Yes.
When just nothing happened for us. And one of the good things about last year was we bounced back quite well. So we've got to just rely on that and see where that takes us. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I wrote, going into the season that I expected a hangover. I didn't exactly see quite so limp a 2-0 defeat coming, but I did expect us to be sluggish. And QPR were up for it. They had the home fans going. Ian Holloway, I've said it in the post-game show I did with Will on YouTube. Don't underestimate this man. I know he's become a bit of a figure of fun in recent years because he says the odd wacky thing and he gives his controversial opinions. But don't forget his record in the Championship. Don't forget that he's a man who got Blackpool into the Premier League, who got Palace, who had been in the doldrums for years, into the Premier League, got Blackpool back to another playoff final, and has kept QPR up last season. He's a very good manager, and he seems to know how to beat Reading. I remember he came on that last day of the season when we'd already been promoted with Palace and did a number on us, and they won at the Medeski Stadium last season as well. So he knew exactly. He'd done his homework on Reading, pushing high, not giving Reading a chance to settle, and that is when the lack of experience in that side, especially in the midfield, Mark, I think really shows. You didn't have that Ledgerwood figure to get his foot on the ball and really drag Reading into the game. As good technically as people like George Evans, John Swift and Liam Kelly are, I think Reading are lacking that bit of leadership in the middle, and that's someone that can just put a big tackle in, get players going.
Yeah, it's that kind of. I don't think it's necessarily the Danny Williams figure that we're missing because he has that drive between a midfield and attack, defence, midfield. But I don't think it's necessarily him that we're missing. It's more a Ledgerwood type, isn't it? Someone who can just put their foot on the ball, barge someone out the way, and just open up the space. At which point you can feed the ball to Kelly and Swift, and they can make things happen. But out of possession, George Evans is a really good man marker, but I don't rate him as someone who's going to work and hassle and harry other players and, win the ball time and time again. And we know that Kelly and Swift just aren't capable of that. It's kind of unfair to demand that they add that to their game. So in terms of what we need to add to that, we've talked on the Tilehurst end amongst ourselves, is Joey Vandenberg enough? I mean, injuries aside, I still don't think he is enough.
No, he didn't exactly make that position his own when he was fit last season. Ben, is this unfair, or is this a scenario that Reading can overcome? They don't necessarily need that destroyer.
I think there's certain teams who you play against where you do need that. So in those games, I think Vandenberg could step up this season and do that job. But it does worry me if they're a bit lightweight in there and they don't have somebody to grab it by the scruff of the neck. And I can't see those three we talked about. They're all good players in their own right, but they play different roles to that, I think. But then again, Quinn potentially could do that. And
yes.
If, it was nice to see him come back last night, and if he can stay fit, which, it isn't too
real big if there.
He could potentially do that role too. So, there is people there, and I trust Stam to find someone to do it.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And I said we'll come on to some transfer rumours, although there's not been that many midfielders linked with the club. But then the ones that actually turn up at the club are never the people that we're linked with. So they seem to get the job done nice and quiet. But just before we move on then to the Gillingham game, Mark, I looked at Stam's overall away record now. And in all competitions, so that's including the FA Cup, League Cup and the playoffs and the start of this season, just 10 wins from 28 away games, 14 defeats, and they've conceded 57 goals. So they're conceding just over 2 goals a game. Is this something that we need to really keep an eye on? Because, last season we had I think we had the best home form in the division last season. But away from home, we thought it's a work in progress. Do we need to keep an eye on this?
I'm not worried about the fact he's won 10 games out of 28. I'm worried about the fact he's drawn 4 out of 28 on the road. And that's, in the Championship on a Tuesday night in, your stereotypical rough end of the country, you've got to grind out these results and you've got to take the point, especially away to the big teams that we know and are going to be rivals with us if we're going to be fighting at the top end. You got to be more, streetwise, I would say is the word that he's not been, and 4 draws away in 28 games. I'd love to compare that with your Coppells, your Pardew's and McDermott's records and see how that compares, because I think they'd have taken the good point far more often.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I think what surprised me is the Fulham game in the playoffs. We saw Reading change to counter Fulham in that away game, and they did toughen up, and it worked really well. And then going into QPR, I suppose because they don't have that same pedigree and fear factor as Fulham, they didn't do that again, and maybe they needed a bit of that in that game too. So it's picking the right way to play in those away games, really, isn't it? You can't always play the way Stamps seem to want to for a lot of the season. Yeah,
it's that having that plan B, and I agree. I think we did kind of see that in the playoff campaign at the end of last season. Hopefully, when he does have more options at his disposal, and whether that's just injured players coming back or people emerging from the academy or signing someone, hopefully he can figure that out, because it's not a sustainable record. You can't concede an average of 2 goals a game away from home and expect to get more results. There's only so many times you can squeeze past Blackburn 3-2 and Bristol City 3-2.
Exactly.
So it's something, especially with the quality of teams in this division this season. So I think it's one to keep an eye on, but as I said, we'll give him a bit of a pass for the time being. Moving on, Gillingham, for 45 minutes, Ben, last night, it looked like this was going to be a long night, and maybe we'd see the newfangled ABBA penalty system. A much changed side, lots of debutants in the side. I think the average age of the squad was 22, and I think there was a couple of players in the squad who were only mere months old when the Medeski Stadium was opened. In fact, I sit here and, without giving too much, I'll give it away. I'm 31 now, and I was older than everyone on the pitch and in the squad. So I felt very old indeed. But they got the job done. 2-0 win. Overall, decent night out?
Yeah, in the end it was. I think they did struggle first half. The trouble with it was Gillingham sat in. Obviously, they knew the way we wanted to play, and they said, fine, come and break us down. And we couldn't seem to find a link between defence and attack. It just sort of got to the midfield, then went back to defence, got to the midfield, went back to defence. Eventually tried a long ball, and it never came off. So it improved a lot in the second half. I'm not sure exactly why, if that was that they got more tired or if we changed it up and tried to play a bit faster, but it definitely improved, and once we got into our flow it was a comfortable win in the end. So
yeah, Mark, the only downside for me is I wish Liam Kelly hadn't scored 2 such lovely goals when the transfer window's open.
I don't know, I don't think he's been linked with anyone yet, has he?
That's the worrying thing.
I know.
They're waiting to pounce.
Yeah, you do.
It's like someone on eBay, they're going to snipe us at the last minute.
It is inevitable, isn't it? But I think, it would take a big surprise for someone to come in for him. But I mean, you say it was a good night out. I was down at Maidenhead versus Wrexham, so that was a perfectly enjoyable night out for me. And I was consistently checking Twitter to find that nothing had really gone on at Reading.
Yeah, I was live tweeting, but I didn't have anything to tweet for long periods of the game. Ben, any of the we had lots of youngsters starting in the game. Rumours has got a lot of high praise from fans on Twitter. I thought he had a very good game. There was Sam Smith out there. You had the re-emergence of Josh Barrett, who of course made that breakthrough under Brian McDermott and then sort of went a bit quiet. But anyone stand out for you?
Yeah, I think Rumours of all of them was the most promising. He had the touch of the Ledgerwood about him, and he did that thing that Ledger always used to do where he sort of roll someone and the ball would go past him and he'd carry on. And once he got into his stride, he did make up a lot of ground, gained some yards in midfield, I suppose. And I did like the look of him, so he's a promising one for the future. Smith, he didn't really have enough service, I don't think, to judge him fairly. Didn't get too involved in the game, really. He put in a shift, but he didn't have, from what I remember, he didn't have 1 or 2 good moments at goal or anything like that, did he? And Barrett, a bit of a disappointment, really. I don't know if I was expecting more from him, but again, he just couldn't quite get a stamp on the game.
No.
But then at the towards the end, Axel Andreasen.
Yes, our latest Icelandic superstar.
Yeah, he came on, and I'm not sure. I think he's a centre back, is he? But
I think that's where historically. I think he went on loan to Bath, didn't he? Last season.
I think he is meant to be a defender.
And came and he's a penalty taker as well, or a set piece taker, because I seem to remember
from the long throw.
I'm not sure if he's a long throw, but I remember from
Fred Jonsson or something.
Yeah, that was Sammy, but I remember he pops up with quite a few goals.
Yeah, I think they liked him down there a lot as well, didn't they? But
of course, where Liam Kelly had a good loan spell as well,
and he looked promising. I thought he was playing sort of left back or left-sided centre back. They had a strange formation in the second half, but he won everything in the air and he looked quite calm on the ball. A few nice forward passes, so he's another one that was promising. Big guy as well for his age.
Yeah,
He looked very
absolutely.
strong.
Yeah, no, I agree on Minamoto. It really reminded me, I went to see them, Reading play in the FA Youth Cup against West Brom a few years ago, and it reminded me of what I saw from Tishbola that night. So it just stood out, just had that sort of composure, older than he is. I don't know whether that will translate to Championship football now, but will remain to be seen. I mean, he's got a good chance just due to the injuries, and we touched on it earlier. Great to see Stephen Quinn come on, and like you said, I mean, long-time listeners to this podcast will know of my love for Stephen Quinn, so I'm horrendously biased, but great to see him back. He really can be a difference maker and a good bit of experience as well. We talked about having that experience in the side, and with likes of Quinn and McShane coming back in, Jan Kermit when he's fit, Gareth McCleary, just boost that up a little bit. And we're having a discussion, Mark, in a little editor's chat on the way home about some of the transfer targets we're linked with, and a name came up and we said, he's a bit old. But to me, I'm not necessarily thinking that, I don't think that signing someone who's on the wrong side of 30 might not be such a bad thing for this squad.
No, I think the experience that we have is decent, but I wouldn't say it's exceptional. I would never describe this squad as being old in the same way that certain teams, like Italian teams, you quite often associate with having a lot of 30 plus players. Just remember that when we went up in 2012, two of the key January signings we made were Jason Roberts and Hayden Mullins, who had been there and done that and could tell everyone how it went and tell everyone that it will be okay and all that sort of stuff. And that's that might be the thing that we're missing at the moment.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. We'll see what happens in the transfer window. We'll touch on a couple of rumours in the news bites shortly. But, into round 2, one step closer to Wembley. I'm, of course, referring to drawing Spurs away in the third round. So, we're in the hat. Anyone in particular you'd like to see us get?
Well, I don't mind, really. It's a good competition to give the youth a chance, I think. And it'd be nice to get a rival, I suppose. I've been watching Reading since about 2001, and I don't remember seeing us play Swindon and Oxford.
I think Swindon got knocked out by Norwich, didn't they? I'm not sure if Oxford made it through.
I don't know. I think they might be playing tonight.
Could well be.
Yeah, there you go. So I'd take one of those two, or just when do the big teams come in? Is that straight away? Or?
Yeah, a lot of Premier League teams come in. The European teams don't. So nailed on Huddersfield away, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a penalty shootout defeat.
Yeah, I think home against League 2 teams all the way for me.
Yes, absolutely.
All the way to the final.
Yeah, I'm very much with you with that. Right, anyway, we've got a few more discussion points brought up in the mailbag as well, but that just about wraps up the recap. We shall move on now to News Bites.
Reading News Bites on the Tilehurst End podcast.
Okay, News Bites time, and we'll start with 4 more years for Liam. He's got a new contract, a new 4-year deal at Medeski Stadium, joining the likes of John Swift, who put pen to paper, and Liam Kelly this summer as well. Mark, another good sign that they're getting the key players locked down.
Yep. Well, we thought that until he played awfully at QPR, so maybe in 6 months' time
he's Hal Robson Canudos.
We'll be desperate to get rid of him. It's nice to see. I'd be interested to know what sort of wages we're paying out, because in the old days, I'm talking the old days from like 5 years ago, we did sort of splash out on these renewals a little bit, didn't we? And I think that was to our detriment. So hopefully that's more a case of giving him a decent increase with a lot of increase if we get promoted.
Yeah, worth a 4-year deal?
Yeah, definitely, in my opinion. I think he's a great player. He's got captain material written all over him, hasn't he? He's a good leader at the back there. I know QPR wasn't a good game, but over the course of last season, he did really well, I thought, and he's only going to get better in this team. And Stam's obviously got a lot of faith in him, and likewise him to Stam, so I'm very pleased to have him.
Yep, wholeheartedly agree. And while I think he didn't have a great game at QPR, I thought he did have a good game against, admittedly, Gillingham, but he had that bit of seniority to snuff out Tom Eaves, who I remember came on for Yeovil in the Checkatrade Trophy last year and really tore our young defence apart. So nice having that bit of experience last night. But joining us from afar, or South Wales to be precise, Modou Barrow. This one was a rumour that had done the rounds a bit earlier in the transfer window, and it seemed to sort of just fizzle out and go away, and then just out of nowhere this deal gets done. He signed a 4-year deal for a reported fee of around about £1.5 million. We've seen 2 substitute appearances from him so far. Mark, excited at this type of signing?
Well, yeah, he adds a little bit of something different, really, which is probably the only thing that I would have wanted in the wings, because we've got quite a few wingers at the moment, and if we're going to add someone who's out-and-out pace, then that's fair enough. If we're going to add another version of, if we had a small Eastern European winger, I'd have thought that would have been a bit pointless. But now we've gone for a bit of pacey African spice, that would be a bit something different. So, yeah, it's nice. He might well be the first African winger to have played for Reading. I know Kebe was Malian, but he was really French.
Massar. Can't forget Massar.
Where is he from?
He was from Liberia.
Oh, right, okay. And there's Eric Abina as well, which I can't remember.
Yes, I think he was Nigerian.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, well, we've got history then, plenty.
Absolutely, yeah.
plenty of good precedent.
The bar has been set very high with those players. Ben, we saw him actually go through the middle for a little bit last night as well. I wonder if that's just because of the fact he might have to play there because of an injury crisis.
Yeah, I think he's done that before, from what I remember. He's played on either wing or through the middle, but the one thing I'd say, he's probably not a clinical finisher, is he? But he's someone who's definitely very different, very fast, tricky against a slow defender. I'd definitely fancy him to cause them trouble, make them sweat. But it's nice to have a different option, as Mark said. And you never know, he might be someone that Stam is thinking can play through the middle, because we've seen it quite a lot when we've come against Al and they don't have that out-and-out striker. They play this fluid formation, don't they, with everyone switching roles and that kind of thing. So maybe he's an ideal player for that sort of system. Yeah,
and you look at the success that, say, Swansea had with the Scott Sinclair type character running around, really stretching defences, and look at the damage that he did to us at Wembley that day.
Yeah,
hopefully Barrow can, unfortunately, hopefully Mody Barrow can be that sort of disruptive influence and sort of give a little bit more space to a Kermigan or a Bodvarsson and people like Swift coming from midfield as well. So, it's impossible to understate the threat that pace causes and the chaos it can cause along a back line and what that can do for the whole mentality. So fingers crossed he does well. So we've not seen too much of him yet, but we spoke to a Leeds fan about him. He didn't have the best of spells at Ellen Road, but even he was quite optimistic of his ability to bounce back, and so fingers crossed he can do that here. Speaking of moves, there's been a move in the boardroom, and it's to a familiar face, Sir John Medeski. He has now got a new title. He is now vice chairman. It has no footballing authority. It's more of a figurehead, sort of ambassadorial role. Mark, the only surprise for me was I thought he was going to be president, but it seems to now be vice chairman.
I'd have thought life president was the title that he might have been endowed with, but I suppose it's a technicality. Maybe it's just slightly different for tax purposes or something.
So John Medeski in tax purposes. That is so 1999. Look that one up. Ben, any objections to John sticking around the boardroom?
No, not at all. He's done so much for the club. He deserves to be here for life, really, doesn't he? So I don't know how much of an influence he's had in past anyway, recent years. I'm sure he'll carry on much the same, to be honest.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a slight punishment for what he did at that Stam press conference, where he basically said, I wouldn't have sacked McDermott.
Yeah, well, it's worked out all right, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Anyway, it's nice to see Sir John stay around. I mean, he's a club legend. He does. If anyone deserves a job for life at the football club, it is him. But speaking of Medeski Stadium, there's been some unpopular car parking changes, Mark, to say the least, I think. Now, the car park at the stadium will cost you £15 to park in, and you have to pre-book it at least 3 business days in advance, according to the website.
Wow.
And with prices going up around the other car parks as well, the Greyhound Stadium is now £10 as well. Lots of motorists not happy with this, Mark, but on the flip side, the club have increased subsidies. It will now cost you just £2 for a shuttle bus from the train station, and there are several park and ride options as well. So where do you sit on this side of the fence? Are you with the motorists, or are you with
I described it to you the other day as when God closes a door, he opens a window, but they've still closed the door here. So it's not necessarily like we've gained very much. It's just a case of certain people are going to be, slightly better off because the bus price has been reduced, and certain people are going to be pretty cheesed off that it's expensive. It's kind of the way it's going with football stadiums now. I was down at Brighton on the weekend and it was £15 to park there pre-booking, and I couldn't get in it, so I had to pay £2 for park and ride up the road. It's quite common now, especially with out of town grounds. In the old days, I can't imagine that you'd have been parking at stadiums very often, and now
parking anywhere around Elm Park was a nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've come to expect it, really, and it's been possibly something that was never going to last anyway, because club land is so valuable. And it's nice that the bus subsidies are there, but I think the elephant in the room with this is the Green Park railway station, and that needs to continue to progress, and we'll see where it goes.
That has got government approval recently. It does look like it's moving forward.
That's good. It needs to.
But I suppose the downside with that, and we've discussed it a few times before, is that they can't lay on extra trains and they can't hold trains there because it's just literally just going to be a little stop off. And I think the comments even where it was never meant to be, particularly serving the Madstad. But Ben, any sympathy for those people that are saying, well, £15 for me, I drive from so far away, I come here and, it's almost cost me as much as a match ticket?
Yeah, of course, but I feel like the club can't win either way, really. I suppose, it's a good opportunity for them to make the money, and I don't begrudge them doing it too much. I drive, but I just park in the town and walk, so there's always that option, I suppose. Yeah,
well, hopefully with the bus lanes, when they're finally completed on the Relief Road, and other bits and pieces, like Mark mentioned, the Green Park Station, it will be a lot easier and attractive to come on public transport. I do have some sympathy. £15 is a lot of money, but Royal Elm Park's going to start soon, so most of the car park is going to be gone anyway. So people are, it's almost kind of, what's the expression, ripping the Band-Aid off and putting up with the pain in the short term, because you're going to have to get used to it. As long as, and the key thing is, as long as there is enough parking for disabled people and people that genuinely really do need it beyond just convenience.
And for players and their big BMWs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need that.
Yeah, quite right. So anyway, let us know your thoughts. As always, you can send us in your thoughts to the tilehurstend@gmail.com. If you want to write an article about it, if you feel particularly strongly, please feel free. We are very much an open book, an open portal for you. It's the whole reason we exist. So if you feel particularly strongly one way or the other, get in touch. As lots of people have done, not on car parking particularly, but on the team in particular, it is time for the mailbag section.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
@the Tilehurst End.
and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End.
Okay, mailbag time, and just before we get to your feedback, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who continues to support this show via Patreon at patreon.com/the Tilehurst End. It is our electronic tip jar. It is our only means of direct funding for this website, for this podcast. If you like what we do, if you want to see us progress, if you want to see us upgrade our equipment, keep going and just give us a bit of a morale boost, it is the way for you to say thank you. We live in a society now where you're used to getting lots of stuff for free, but the amount of time and effort that goes into these things is quite a lot, shall I say, and we like to provide as a professional a service as possible and experience. As much as we like to say we're an unprofessional joke, we try and do our best. And the extra bit of funding we get through Patreon really helps us. It gives us the ability to go out and buy, I bought a new webcam and a couple of new microphones just this summer, and I could only do that through the money you guys donate. So thank you to everyone who has already joined the cause. And if you're on the fence, go on. A couple of quid for you means absolutely nothing. It's a cup of coffee or a packet of crisps or something at a service station, but for us it does make a big difference. So patreon.com/Tilehurst End, and Martin Collins is the latest person to step up and join that elite circle. So thank you very much, Martin. Anyway, moving on to the mailbag. I said you can get in touch with us via thetilehurstend@gmail.com, the Tilehurst End on Twitter, and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End, as these fine folk have done, starting off with our own Raw Hoops. He says, which of the academy players that featured v Gillingham are you most excited by? And whom do you expect to be the next big breakthrough? We kind of touched on this earlier, Ben, but is Rinomota the man for you, or do you still hold out bigger hopes for the likes of, say, a Danny Loader or a Sam Smith?
Yeah, I think Rinomota, based on that game, he didn't do himself any harm, looked very impressive, and I think with Liam Kelly coming through last season, all those young players will be jumping at the bit to follow in his footsteps, really, so that's nice. I think he was definitely the main one. Danny Loader had that fantastic game pre-season at QPR, and I don't know if everyone's expectations are now way too high for him, or, he's set the bar very high, hasn't he, expecting to score 4 goals every game he plays, but he's one that I'd love to see come through at some point as well, I think. Yeah,
Mark, I know you didn't see last night's game, but from the buzz and the hype machine, anybody in that list that you're particularly keen to keep an eye on?
I saw Rinomota play a couple of seasons ago when he was in the under 18, whatever side it was then, and he looked decent. I'm quite glad that Stephen's asked this question, actually, because I've been meaning to write an article on the whole, what I consider to be like the Jaws effect of Reading's academy players.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
That effectively...
Do you need me to play the Jaws music as we're talking about this?
Well, potentially, depending on how dangerous the players become. It goes back to Tariq Fosu and how I think in Jaws, the less you see of Jaws, the scarier it is, because it's like the tension and all the expectation, all the build-up. The less you see of a Reading Academy player, the better we think they are. And that's definitely happened with Tariq Fosu, and I'm worried that it's happened with Danny Loader, because even in a behind closed doors friendly, people are tipping him to be Premier League standard, and we've got to be wary of it. So what we've seen against Gillingham, it's good. As I say, that's kind of why I want to have a nice, basically the same game again in the second round of the Cup, just to verify what's happened.
Yeah, for every Gylfi Sigurdsson that you see look sensational against Luton, you have Nicholas Bignell that tears Paul Burton apart and is now playing his trade. I don't know. I think he's at Thatcham, someone like that now. No disrespect to Thatcham. So yeah, be wary. So yeah, I mean, I'd agree with what Ben said. I like the look of Inamoto, but I want to see a lot more of these players before I make any snap judgments. Martin Ingram, is there a reason behind our injury crisis, i.e. training or a fitness regime? Mark, any theories? Or was it just bad luck?
No, I don't like to get involved in these theories. I wait until when it happened under Adkins or something, didn't it? And
it did, yeah.
I think Adkins, they actually came out in public and said that we have to change things. Wait until that happens, and then we get worried. But at the moment, it seems like a bit of bad luck and maybe some other stuff.
Yeah, but it looks most of the injuries, I think, are sort of either freak injuries or sort of chronic injuries with people like McCleary. So
yeah, I don't think you can read too much into it. Like Mark said, I think if players had come out and been angry about the training or something like that, then we could, judge it more. But you always get these injuries throughout the season. We just seem to have had a whole load in one go, which maybe means later on in the season we won't get as many and we'll keep a squad together. So
yeah, I don't think the late finish to last season particularly helped things as well. I think a lot of players were playing through the pain barrier, especially people like McCleary were open in the sort of niggles and knocks they were playing through. McShane was dealing with injuries all towards the back end of last season. So, Quinn was a chronic injury as well. It sounds like Kermigan was a bit of a freak occurrence. Callum Harriott was a long-term one.
Well, it was a long-term one, then he got better, and then it happened again.
Yeah. So, I mean, there might be something to it, but I would like to think, this wasn't really a talking point last season. So, fingers crossed that it is something that clears up, and I'm sure I said if there is something to it, usually it finds its way to sort of get out into the public domain. Players find that way, and we've not had that so far. So until that happens, unfortunately, it's just bad luck. Ian Phillips, if a Football Manager style Brexit comes true with strict points for work permits for EU players, do you think we'll ever sign anyone ever again? For those of you who don't play Football Manager, it enacts Brexit. You play it, and a couple of seasons in, suddenly you have to get work permits for all your European players. So to sign the likes of a Joseph Mendes, well, you probably just wouldn't be able to because he just wouldn't be able to get enough points.
Yeah, Gibraltar became independent on iGame as well, which should be a bit of a shock to the system.
Unbelievable.
If that came through. Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing if we didn't sign Sandro Weiser and Danzel Gravenberch and all those players that we just kind of pluck from random European teams, would it?
No. And, it would just hopefully lead us to better things because our academy does seem to be doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of thing you cross that bridge when you come to it. We don't worry too much about that for now. And like you say, the academy's always had a good status, hasn't it? And it's maintaining that. So if you can keep plucking players from there to fill the gaps, then I'm more than happy with that.
Well, Reading Pete's got an interesting suggestion just to negate that entire proposal. He just says after Saturday's result and performance, should we just fold the club? I mean, it's an option.
That's the spirit.
Yeah, we'd have to start being a podcast that talks about Reading Town, or they don't exist either. Maybe we'll be Maidenhead's #1 podcast.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Absolutely. Up the Magpies. Matt, does the QPR game signal the need for more signings? Perhaps 4 or 5? For me, a striker, a defensive midfielder, central midfielder and centre-backs are a must. Well, transfer rumour-wise, at the moment, as we mentioned, there's not actually a lot going on. There is continued speculation about Mr. Oliveira from Norwich. He had a bit of a tantrum when he scored their equaliser against Fulham at the weekend, Mark. Running over to Mr. Farker in their dugout and holding his shirt up, pointing to that number 9.
Well, if he feels undervalued, then he'll certainly feel valued at Reading, won't he? Which would be good. But I thought we got the Tilehurst End exclusive on that it wasn't happening. So
yeah,
as far as this podcast is concerned.
Yeah, and I know there were some spurulous rumours going around Twitter last night. But
some agents that looked Portuguese.
Yes, I may have. I can exclusively debunk that, as I think there were some slight shenanigans going on from some over enthusiastic supporters.
Yeah, no names.
That, or they were just leading me off the scent because there were actually agents there.
Yeah, it's the double bluff.
Absolutely. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, looking at on the transfer rumour front, there is nothing that's really concrete out there. But I touched on it earlier, Mark. This is a football club that historically just tends to get their business done and doesn't play it out too much in the public eye.
No, we don't, but that doesn't mean that we won't play it out in the back rooms, and it won't take a long time to get these deals done. We had Liam Moore take ages to get done last summer, didn't it? And did we sign anyone deadline day last summer?
Blackett was near the deadline.
Yeah, so historically we've had some quite late deals, so I wouldn't rule out us signing another 3 or maybe 4 players.
Yeah, Ben, do you think we need as many as 4 or 5?
Not particularly. I mean, if everybody was fit, it would be quite a big squad, wouldn't it? And of decent players, and we did pretty well last year with that squad. So they've got replacements for who's gone, I suppose. So it's always nice to add a couple more if they're quality players, but I wouldn't say there's a dire need to get people in. I'm pretty happy with the general state of the squad.
Yeah, I think Mark, last week, didn't we? We predicted how many more would come in through the door. And I think the consensus was, 2 and 3, I think, were the numbers me and you and Johnny put out. And so they've signed Barrow since then. So I'd be perfectly happy if they got 2 more in. Maybe another one if it's a loan. If they're saying that McCleary's actually out for longer than possible, that's for me when you do dip into that loan market. But on the permanent front, just get 1 or 2 more quality players in. I said that sort of destroyer midfielder type, and maybe a pacey, nippy, direct striker, and I think I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, a striker and or a centre back would be the only 2 that I'd add on to
Do we really need a centre back though?
We're going to play 3 at the back.
But you've got Blackett, you've got Moore, you've got McShane, you've got a Laurie.
Yeah,
Vandenberg can play there a bit.
But I'd be happier with Blackett as a fringe option than I'm talking about a good centre back here. Would ideally, if he's not better than Blackett, then there's no point.
But yeah, but I don't know.
That's the difficulty of the market, isn't it? Because
but I think
we can't just click our fingers.
I think if you look at the first choice 3 though, of being a Laurie, McShane, and Moore, or are you saying McShane or a Laurie's have their place in doubt?
I don't know. I don't think you can rely on McShane to play 40 games a season. And yeah, Moore and Ilori can, and I think we play our best football with the 3 at the back. So I think you prioritise making that a really solid. And let's remember that our defence isn't that great at the moment.
Play tiebreak here, Ben. Do we need a centre back?
I wouldn't say we desperately need one, but I wouldn't be adverse to having.
Would you rather have a
one.
centre back or striker?
I'd rather have a striker because I feel Kermagant's retiring anyway. End of the season.
Yeah.
So long term, I'd rather have a clinical finisher, a 20 goal a season person, and then next season you add an extra defender.
Well, this will really get everyone talking because Ben raised earlier while we were between segments that apparently there was some Shane Long rumours going around.
Every summer.
About a deleted tweet about going home. So, we'll do our best to look into that one, but I wouldn't hold your breath. Although, what a signing. Oh, sorry, I'm now thinking about it.
My heart would love that.
Everybody else listening is now going, Shane Long? Let's get him back.
It's going to be a Football League World tomorrow.
Don't joke, it will be. It'll be on as the Tilehurst end revealed. Anyway, Chris Hartley. I've felt since the moment we lost Danny Williams that the balance of the midfield is off. We got bullied by QPR, off the ball by their midfielders, getting in our faces. Kelly Swift and Evans fell off the pace all game. While Danny Williams will not be replaced directly, we need a solid older head / anchor in the midfield who won't be bullied and allows Kelly and Swift to play. I feel that in the absence of a beater threw the overall balance of the team off, and then we will bounce back, but we need that anchor. I think that's pretty much what we said earlier.
Yeah, fair.
So yeah, but nice to see you agree, Chris. The absence of a beater though, as well, was noticeable at QPR, and again, I think last night he really does sort of give that balance, being that wing back.
Yeah, he suits that role perfectly, doesn't he? Coming from playing on the wing originally, he's much better going forward, I think, than Blackett, but he's still reliable as a defender as well, and he's just a good, solid player in that position, and can pop up with a good delivery every now and then as well. So I think they do miss him. I'd like him in the first team.
Absolutely. Paul Dawson asked a question. Out of our new signings so far, has any improved our squad and not just filled gaps?
Bod Varson's improved it because last season we needed a striker. We've now got another striker who can play the Kermagant role. I'd say that's a pretty straightforward improvement.
Flipping that on its head though, is he? It's very difficult with 55 minutes to go off. But is he an upgrade on Kermagant? Because if you're saying he's playing the Kermagant role and backup for him,
doesn't need to be an upgrade. If he plays, let's theoretically say that he plays, 30 minutes of every. Kermagant plays 60 minutes. He'll play 30 minutes. Then Kermagant gets the rest. Therefore, he's better in the 60 minutes. That improves the squad.
Yeah, I think I'll go with that. Ben, any of the other 3 major signings you think actually improved?
Sure, time will tell, won't it? I agree that Bodvarsson, I think he can be an improvement. And, when Kermorgant first came in, he didn't do particularly well. He didn't score many goals in that first half of the season. I didn't expect him to go on and become as good as he is. So if Bodvarsson is a similar player, then it suggest that he will suit this style and get goals. So, and Barrow as well, I think, like we were saying earlier, something different, a bit more pace, a bit of trickery. So I think he helps improve it, yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's a little bit better. I don't think there's a slam dunk. I think we said this last week, a slam dunk player that I've gone, yes, he's made us better. Bodvarsson could be that player, but we need to see a lot more of him first. And the same for the others, really. It's very tricky to try and judge people off one game. So but that remains to be seen. N. Cole RFC 92 says, did Stam get his team selection right at QPR? As I don't think he did, as Bodvarsson was a risk starting and Blackett was exposed all the time. I don't think he had much choice. Selection-wise.
Did you replace Omar Richards and Sam Smith in for the first game of the season?
Yeah.
I'm not sure you did.
I mean, Bodvarsson was carrying a bit of a knock, but I mean, do you dare start Sam Smith away at QPR in the first game of the season?
No, too difficult that. I think he had to go with him, really, and his work effort and everything like that was aiming to inspire the rest of them, just didn't quite work on the day.
Yeah. Felix asked, does Quinn's return preclude the need for a Williams-type player? Did they misjudge the pre-season? Interested, must be impossible to judge. With Bodvarsson's record, what should be his goal target? Should we look forward to the League Cup more with more youngsters? What's our biggest injury loss? And thoughts on Popper? So, just a few questions there for Felix. Well, I think we've we'll touch on Quinn then. Do you think Quinn can be the Williams replacement?
He can be, yeah.
Okay. Did they misjudge pre-season, Ben?
No, I don't think so. I think they did the same as last year, really, didn't they? Played away from in the training camp, and I think they've just been a bit unlucky with injuries, really. Yeah,
and a late start as well, I said, with the playoffs and trying to get that rest in. What should be Bodvarsson's goal target? What would you be happy with?
1 goal in every 3 games.
Okay, a 1 in 3 rate, Ben?
Yeah, I'd say similar. If he can hit 15 in the season, then that's impressive.
I'd be over the moon with 15. I think I'd take 10. I think I'd take 10. It doesn't really matter where the goals come from, as long as the goals come in. And as I said, if he helps free up space, and the same for Barrow as well, if they free up space for, Swift and Kelly to get 10, 12 each, that's all you need.
Certainly, and with that work rate as well, I remember when we did have Shane Long, he used to, nip in and win those free kicks and penalties. If he can replicate that kind of thing, then that's straight away helping other people score, so...
Do you look forward to the League Cup more when there are youngsters playing rather than just a slightly modified first team?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's certainly given us something to talk about, and the kids won. If they'd have lost, then I think we lost. Was it Northampton we played, and we lost on penalties a few years ago?
Yes,
and that was that's awful when that happens. But as long as you win and you have the young kids playing, then everyone's happy.
Yeah. What is the biggest injury loss, Ben?
It's got to be Kermorgant, I think, for sheer, where do those goals come from then, isn't it? He had so much to the team as a talisman as well. I think he's my biggest miss. I just love him.
Yeah, I'd say Kermorgant. I think, again, if you gave me that McCleary we saw in the first half of last season, I think he would be a real asset to this team. But you have to start to wonder now, after all these injuries and all these setbacks, are we ever going to get peak McCleary back?
Yeah, McCleary on form is a fantastic player and fully fit, but he does seem to struggle with niggles all the time, doesn't he? And you can tell. He plays a very different game when he's struggling.
Absolutely. And Mark, thoughts on Popper?
Well, another player who's had 1 game. He needs a run of probably 5 or 10 in this team to really show his stuff. And if he gets that run, which I think he will because of the injuries, we'll see. And then we'll have some thoughts on him because it's too early at the moment in the season.
Absolutely. I thought he had a good pre-season. I thought he showed little flashes against QPR, and he showed little flashes last season. But yeah, he needs a solid run of games, and he's going to have it with the injuries to Harriott and McCleary. It's a big chance for him, so hopefully he takes it. Anyway, thank you, Felix. A bit greedy with your questions. Try and keep them to 1 or 2. But no, seriously, we appreciate them all. Andy from Thatcham says, hi, great to have the podcast back for the new season. Thank you very much. He says, sending this question before the Gillingham game, but judging by the injuries and the abysmal QPR performance, pre-season appears to have been a bit of a disaster. What do you think has gone wrong? Who's to blame, and has the club gone backwards? Well, we sort of touched on this, Ben, a minute ago. And I said, I don't know how you can get pre-season wrong.
No, I think everybody's pre-season is the same, really. You're just focusing on getting fit and playing some tactics and things like that. But I think we've just been unlucky with the injuries, really. I don't think you can read too much into it.
I think the only thing that I think think you can do badly in pre-season if you know, you go to Australia and then you have a night stay there, then you go to China, then you play a game, then you find yourself in all sorts of conditions. And the club have been very straightforward with their pre-season. I didn't think it was the best schedule. Playing the 2 games in one day probably made sense from their point of view. Didn't make much sense from my point of view, but I don't think it's affected, you know, the performances and everything.
Yeah, as I said, for me, it just all goes back to the scheduling season. Reading didn't finish their season until the end of May. They had no idea if they were planning for a Premier League start or a Championship start. As it was, they only had, 10 weeks between the final kick in the playoff final and the start of the new season. You've got to give your players a little bit of recovery time. So, you know, they had to hastily throw it together, and then it's an earlier start than you have in the Premier League. So just a really awkward pre-season. As I said, I expected this hangover to come, and unfortunately it has. So, so longer term we'll be able to judge, but for the time being, I'm going to give him a bit of a pass. And finishing off the mailbag today is Stephen Hansel. He says, Evans was very composed at the back. Interested to see his passing stats. Renamota looked good, like a young dynamic Mikel Leisurewood. Great to have Quinn back. He was very lively in midfield. What did you think of George Evans dropping into the back line, Ben?
Yeah, I think he did a good job. We know he can pass the ball out, and he's very calm on the ball. He took it off Yakula in the centre of the pitch, which made a nice change from always having to go out to the fullback. And a couple of times he did turn and then take those extra strides forward. From a defensive point of view, he wasn't particularly tested. I'd say more kind of swept up and did that side of the game and left him to just be the distributor from the back, really.
Yeah, I think if we see the Evans that we saw in the playoffs, then we'll have a really decent player on our hands. It's about that consistency. And as you touched on earlier, with the respect that we showed to Huddersfield and Fulham by man-marking their main central midfielders, we need to do that every week. We can't just say, oh no, it's QPR or Barnsley, we don't need to bother. We need to do that every single time, and then I think hopefully the results will turn themselves around a little bit. Yeah,
I'd like to bring you the passing stats, but the usual stats places we go to for these things haven't got any. I don't think they quite cover the Carabao Cup first round. But I mean, I thought he looked very good in possession, and I imagine they were pretty high. I don't think George Evans, I don't think his passing stats were anything particularly amazing or bad. I just don't think they were there. He did misplace a few against QPR though, so... As I said, the passing for Reading players never seems to be a problem in the first 2/3 of the pitch. It's that final third, and it's what they do with those key passes that matter. So, you know, I don't care if he makes 99 great sideways passes.
No, it's finding that killer ball, isn't it? That's
exactly
what we've been lacking.
Indeed. Anyway, thank you to everyone who's got in touch with the mailbag. I said, if you get in touch with us nice and early using that hashtag TT podcast, you've got a much better shout of getting into the mailbag or dropping an email over to thetilehurstend@gmail.com. And again, thank you to everyone who's contributed via patreon.com/thetilehurstend. Anyway, we'll round out the show. We'll look ahead to the Fulham game on Saturday. That's coming up in Any Other Business.
The Tilehurst End Podcast.
Any Other Business.
Okay, Fulham. Remember them? You know, that team we last played in a championship game at home, albeit a playoff semi-final. That was a good night, wasn't it, Mark? Let's think about that, not what followed.
Yeah,
Glorious
I don't think the
night.
Fulham fans want to think about that. We should just put it on the big screen beforehand. Just have that penalty, even the handball.
I don't know about
just
that.
the bit when Kermit punches it onto the Fulham player's arm. Should just be over on loop.
Do you think they're going to give us a bit of grief on Saturday?
If they beat us, yes.
But before the game, do you think they're going to be a bit of a gloaty?
Nah, they can do what they want before the game. It's all about the final score, isn't it?
Okay, well, let's get on to that final score. This is going to be a difficult game. Fulham are one of the pre-season favourites for promotion. And even just going into this game, the bookies have got them evens to win this. Reading are nearly 3-1 to win a home game against a team they only lost to 1 out of 4 times last season. So... go figure. If you do have faith in Reading, there's money to be made there. Hashtag gamble aware. Ben, can you see why the bookies have got us quite so outsidey?
Well, they love Fulham, don't they? I think that's the issue. I mean, we didn't start well, but our home form last season was excellent. And as you rightly said, we did have one terrible game against Fulham, but in general, we changed the way we played and managed to negate them pretty well. So I'd be relatively confident Reading can get some sort of result this weekend.
Mark will be welcoming back Mr. Norwood to the Mercy Stadium.
As it happens. Is he blonde now? Or is he still blonde?
I'm not sure.
He's got to do something to stay interesting, hasn't he? Yeah, I'm surprised they're out. I was surprised to see Scott Malone and Scott Parker go. I thought
Parker's retired and Malone has been swooped up by Huddersfield.
Yeah. So there's no reason to think they're a better team than they were last year. So I've never heard of their players they've signed anyway, so neither of their fans, so no one knows how good they are.
Yeah, they've still got the dangerous Tom Kearney. They've got Sonny Luco, who's apparently a transfer target for us. Sessegnon and Fredericks as well, good fullbacks. It's still a very good team looking at it.
And I think it's probably a better away team than a home team as well. That's probably the reason that they're highly rated in the bookies. But as I said earlier, we're decent at bouncing back, so I see no reason. If we lose this, then I'll be heavily disappointed. Let's put it that way.
Ben, what's your feeling going into this one?
Yeah, I agree. They are a good team, and they've been a good team for a few years now, haven't they? And Stan was saying after one of the games the other day, that's his target is to build a squad, and you progress over time. You can't do it overnight, and they've sort of done that. It's a difficult one. I think they've got motivation there after the playoffs to come and scupper us for sure, so I think they'll be well up for it, and I'd hope we will be too, so I could see a draw, to be honest.
I think draw is what I'm leaning towards. I think I'd be very optimistic to hope we can win this. Is there anyone that started on Tuesday night that you think has to now get that start? Would you throw any of those youngsters in? Would you throw in a motor in?
It's difficult. That's a hard game to throw him straight in, isn't it? And it will be a very different game, I think, because I wouldn't expect us to have as much of the ball as we did. We must have had 90% possession against Gillingham, whereas Fulham like to keep the ball as well.
I think we lost the possession battle in all the games last season.
Yeah,
and against QPR.
Yeah.
I don't think that Fulham will do anything different than what we played last year against them, and we did quite well against them last year, and we haven't really changed the team, neither have they. So it kind of suggests that if we lose this one, that we've gone backwards and they've stayed as good as they were or gone forwards. So it's a good litmus test.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that lineup that played in their 1-1 draw with Norwich on the opening day, and I look at ours that played at QPR, and that to me seems a mismatch. I mean, hopefully there are a couple of people. Hopefully Bodvarsson can be fit, and maybe Quinn plays, and Jordan Abita can make it back as well. He's one of the names mentioned. Joe van der Beek doesn't sound like he's too far away. So hopefully Reading can spring a few surprises and get a few faces and a bit more experience in there. It is going to be an uncomfortable game. This, it's not what Stam likes, because Stam never likes to concede that possession battle. But I think he realised that going in. You only saw how Reading adapted, as we talked about, in the playoffs, to know exactly how much Stam respects Fulham and knows their power. And, that whole 5-0 from last season is still there as well. So it's going to be a difficult one. Reading haven't lost back-to-back league games to start a season since 1998, I do believe.
What happened to us that year?
It was the first season of Badesky under Tommy Burns, and we got whooped by Wrexham and then whooped by, I want to say Bristol Rovers, but my memory might forgive me. That was when Peter van der Kwak and co were playing.
That's before my time, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'm sure Dave Hambags Harris is screaming at the podcast right now, bemoaning me for not knowing this. So answer on a postcard, folks. Right, speaking of Hambags Harris, he takes an early lead in the prediction league. He has 1 point. Everybody else has 0. He's the only one that saw QPR winning, although he saw a 1-0 win for QPR, not 2. So it is 1-0. Mark, give you first attempt to get back into the game.
I'm going to have to say 2-0 Fulham.
2-0 Fulham, so that's a 0-2. After all that talk of us bouncing back, you've suddenly gone for a 2-0 Fulham.
I never said I thought we'd be going to do it. I just would be disappointed.
No,
if we
fair enough. The prediction league is more important. Ben, unfortunately not in the prediction league, but I will give you an honorary prediction and the chance of bragging rights next time we come on.
Yeah, sure. I go for 1-1.
You go for a 1-1, and that is exactly the same prediction I'm going to go for as well. So there you go. I'm going to go for 1-1. So I'll get the predictions for Johnny Handbags, Dave, and our mystery contestant, who will be my co-host on the podcast section. I just don't want to spoil it. I just want to...
Well, they already got the QPR result wrong.
They did.
They're obviously not that good.
Well, they've replaced Charles very well, because Charles never did. We came second, I think, it was his best year.
So Simon, a good journalist, has no idea what the score is.
Indeed. Anyway, speaking of podcast extra, it may well return on Friday. I said I do need to arrange this with my co-host. He's been on holiday, so he's coming back now, so I don't know if he's fully back and up to speed and ready to go on Friday. If not, it'll be the following week. This show itself will return either Monday or Wednesday. Again, I just need to speak to people and see if they're available to squeeze a show in before that Villa game on the following Tuesday night. If not, we will be back on the Wednesday to round up that and Fulham. So keep an eye on the Twitter feed. As always, please keep those thoughts coming via all the usual places. Head over to YouTube as well, youtube.com/Tilehurst End. After the game on Saturday, we did a post-game show. The audio was eventually uploaded to our audio feed as well. So it's a great chance. We do it live, so it's a good chance for you to get your instant reaction in. Again, it's a bit ad hoc, but we try and give as much notice as we can for that. So youtube.com/Tilehurst End and facebook.com/Tilehurst End are the places for you to watch that. Again, thanks for all the Patreon love. And gents, thank you both for giving up your time on this wet and miserable Wednesday evening.
No worries, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. And it said in the meantime, thanks for downloading, thanks for subscribing, and all the love and support. And of course, in the meantime, come on you Rs.